an amazing guest here, and we're so honored to have her. We've got Kim, who's got more in common in front of her name. And she's the younger sister of the murdered Yorkshire MP, Jo Cox. And Kim has been doing some amazing work, and such a lively person that, you know, it's so easy to kind of mess about with her, even if it's virtually at the moment. So since Kim's sister's death, she's been working to create a positive legacy for Jo, with a specific focus on social cohesion and creating positive relationships within our communities. And I think I've been part of the More in Common setup group across the country, and I've been seeing Kim a bit more than I have in the past, which is amazing experience. And under the More in Common theme, taken from Jo's maiden speech in Parliament, Kim is the chair of Batley and Spen, More in Common team of volunteers. She's a non-political group. She's a non-political group from a diverse range of backgrounds who are organizing a series of community-based events and strategies, focusing on the things we all share, which we can bring people together on. And you know what? I've known Kim for just a couple of months, but what I've known of Kim has been amazing. You know how we hear so much about Jo Cox. She's a true... she truly lives up to what we hear about Jo, and I think maybe in Jo's form we see Kim here, and it's such a beautiful person inside and out. And we're so honored to have you, Kim.
Thank you so much, Mahmouda. Thank you so much. I'm a bit embarrassed, but thank you very much indeed. Do you want me to crack on?
Yes.
Right, okay. Well, this is so exciting. I am so excited to see you. It's wonderful to be here in Birmingham this evening. It was a very, very easy journey. No problems at all getting here, so that was good. So yeah, I'm really, really thrilled to be joining you all. Thank you, and thank you, Mahmouda, for that really lovely and yes, probably over-complimentary introduction. I'm going to start by talking. I'm going to talk for about 10-15 minutes, but I'm going to start by throwing you all a big virtual hug. So I'm sending it now. I'm sending it now, and I want you to grab it and take it. Oh, that is your big virtual hug, because I am a real hugger, and I've missed hugs during this lockdown. It's been hard, hasn't it? It's been really hard. So that we're starting with a group hug. So yeah, I mean, Mahmouda's done a great introduction to me there and covered a lot of the basics really. So I work now as an ambassador for the Jo Cox Foundation, and I chair a wonderful group of volunteers here in West Yorkshire called More in Common, Batley and Spen. And the reason I do both those things is because indeed Jo Cox was my sister. And it's been a tough week this week because it's 4 years since Jo was killed. And on Tuesday it was the anniversary, and you don't want to focus too much on anniversaries, do you, sometimes, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you have a dreadful time. And we didn't want to do that, but it was a tough day. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But what we've done to try and get us through that tough time is we focus on the great get-together. And we focused on how Jo lived and how special she was and how wonderful she was. So I'll talk a little bit more about the great get-together in a second. As Mahmouda says, we're on brand. We've got our great get-together t-shirts. I have my great get-together mug. I've already, we're nearly 2 days into the great get-together. Nice, girls. And I've already eaten my own body weight in cake, which is what happens every year. So that's good. So that's going well. But yeah, in terms of my role, I'll talk a little bit. I'll talk about the Jo Cox Foundation. I'll talk about the More in Common community, of which you are all a part. And I'll talk then a little bit more about the great get-together. So in terms of the Jo Cox Foundation, because those three things are what we do and they get a bit confusing sometimes, but in terms of the Jo Cox Foundation, the foundation is the charity that we set up after Jo was killed. And it was one of those things at the time, and you know, anybody who's been through anything tragic and unbelievably horrific, you know, knows there's not much anybody can do to make it any better. But one thing that people think is, well, I'd like to give some money, you know, so we set up this fund and people just gave money because they didn't know what else to do. So with that money, we funded 3 causes very close to Jo's heart. So we funded the White Helmets in Syria, who do amazing work there in terms of volunteers working in the horrific war conditions that we have over there, sadly still ongoing, and we funded Hope Not Hate, which is an organisation that works to tackle right-wing extremism, and that was very much because of how Jo was killed. And then we funded the Royal Voluntary Service locally here in Kirklees, where we grew up, and they do a lot of work to tackle loneliness and social isolation. So we picked 3 causes that we know Jo would have supported, and we picked causes that were very much representative of Jo's life. So we had a local, a national and an international cause, and those 3 organisations have gone on to do amazing things. The money that was left, which wasn't a huge amount, but we thought, well, let's set something up in Jo's name. And we didn't really have a big plan or anything, so it's been a very organic process. And what we've got now, 4 years down the line, is we've got an organisation called the Jo Cox Foundation, and we've kind of only recently, I would say the last 18 months, come up with our values and our vision, and you can see loads of that on the website. But really, we're working towards building a kinder, more compassionate society, where everybody has a sense of belonging and a sense of identity. And we've got these strong, compassionate communities that focus on the things that we have in common rather than the things that divide us. And we have local work, we have national work, and we have international things that we support. We're only a very small team, but we've got a huge network of wonderful people, including you guys, who do a lot of the work out there in the real world, you know, for us as the sort of ground troops. So yeah, so that's kind of how we work. And there's huge amounts of progress that we've made. I mean, one of the things that we've done a huge amount of work on was loneliness. And, you know, we formed a coalition on the back of the work that Jo had started on loneliness. And we ended up with the world's first ever Minister for Loneliness and the world's first ever government strategy for loneliness. You know, and it just shows you how a small and mighty organisation can connect with other passionate individuals and organisations to make a real difference. And I'm very, very proud of that work. And it also showed how Jo wanted to work on a cross-party basis on the issues that really matter. Because when I talk about Jo, I know she was a politician when she was killed, but Jo was first and foremost a humanitarian. And Jo cared about people. And she went into politics to make a difference to people's lives. And she'd done that in the voluntary sector in some really tough places all around the world, war zones and places where people often had very little food or water and often very little hope. But she came back to England, to the UK, to make a difference in the community where we grew up. But her motivation was the same. You know, she wanted to help people. And it's amazing, even now, I can't walk down the street without meeting somebody who Jo had helped and had changed their lives, even though she was only an MP for a very short space of time. So that's a bit about the foundation, and like I said, there's lots more you can have a look at in that. I'll come on to More in Common now, and I think probably quite a few people on this call and in this event will know where More in Common comes from. But if anybody doesn't, More in Common was an expression that was taken from Jo's first speech that she made in Parliament, so her maiden speech in Parliament. And what she said, we live in a really diverse area, probably like you guys do. People from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, living together, and lots of difference. But what Jo observed as she was going round the constituency and round the community was that despite all those differences, we've actually got far more in common than that which divides us. Because fundamentally, we're all dealing with a lot of same issues on a day-to-day basis, and we've all got to feed our kids and pay our bills and cope with the stresses of work and juggling life and, you know, all those sorts of things. So there's a lot of commonality there, and we all want what's best, I hope, for the community and for the country as a whole. We maybe just have a slightly different view what that looks like, you know. So that's where More in Common came from. And what we've got really now in the past few years, the More in Common community is building across the country, because when Jo was killed, a bunch of people came together here in Batley and Spen, as you might expect, and we just pulled together, and people from all sorts of different backgrounds who'd never met each other before, quite a lot of whom knew Jo, but also quite a few who didn't. And it's this kind of strange, dysfunctional family, which on paper shouldn't work at all, but it's really, really powerful because we all want what's best for this area. So that was More in Common, Batley and Spen. Now, what I didn't know at the time, through the work that we were doing with Hope Not Hate, that other groups popped up as well. And these were a mixture of different people from all different backgrounds, again, all across in different areas of the country. And what we're trying to do now through the foundation is we're trying to really develop this More in Common community. And that's one of the things I guess I'm asking for your help and support with today, through Mahmouda and through Salma, you know, and Peter. It's really important, Suzanne. It's really important, you know, we want to help support the work that you're doing, because quite frankly, it's brilliant. And that's where the real difference is made. I mean, I know we're lucky through Jo's foundation that we have got reach into government and we can get things done in Westminster. People will listen to us as an organisation. But what I'm most proud of, I think, in all the time that we've been doing this stuff, is the grassroots work and the stuff that is going on in communities up and down the country, often on a voluntary basis. People doing hours and hours of amazing stuff for nothing. And that's what's kept me going locally. And when I hear stories like that across the country. So I do think, for us to make a difference on these things, this grassroots work is really, really important. And the way that we do that in Batley and Spen, and this isn't necessarily built on any big strategic plan, it's been a very organic process, is we do community-based events, and the Great Get Together is at the heart of that. We also do a lot of partnership building and networking. And I don't like the word networking. It sounds a bit cheesy, doesn't it? A bit businessy. But really, over the past sort of three years, we've built a really powerful network. And I think that's what's given us the capacity and the ability to do some of the stuff that we've done. And one thing I would say on that is, it's really important to me working across the sectors. So the voluntary sector is amazing, has got some real strengths. But actually, once you start to tap into the public sector and have a positive relationship with the council, and then you start tapping into private sector and get some business support, who might not have much time but might be able to help you with some financial support, you know, believing in what you're doing, then I think you can get a really powerful movement going on. So we've done quite a lot of that. So we've got the community-based events, we've got the partnerships and networking, and then we've got, I guess, what I call the tough stuff. This is the community sort of project work. And this is the bit where we try and reach out to people who don't necessarily embrace the More in Common ethos. And sadly, we know, and we've seen in recent times, that those people still exist. And that, I think, is something that I would love to work more with you guys on, as to the best ways to do that, and to try and, you know, work with people who may have different views to us. Because what I think about that is, we can either ignore those people and pretend they're not there, or we can try and work with them to try and understand what has led them down their path in life. And that's really what I think is probably the most helpful way forward, because I refuse to believe that there's that many really nasty, evil people out there. I think people are a product of what they've been through, and I think sometimes we need to just try and have a stronger understanding of that. But that's tough, and we've only really scratched the surface locally on some of that stuff. We've done stuff with near neighbours, and we're doing more stuff around having those difficult conversations. We did a partnership with the Daily Mirror over the Great Get Together weekend called Britain Connects, which you might have seen, which was partnering up people with different views about things. So I think those are really powerful. Anyway, I'm chuntering on a bit, right? So let's keep going. Come on. So the other thing that we do, we kind of think, well, how are we going to make these differences? How are we going to make these changes? So we sort of picked 4 strands. And again, there was no scientific basis for this. It was kind of just like felt right. My background is in sport and physical activity, and I feel really passionate about the power of sport and physical activity to bring people together. So we do a lot of stuff around that. We've got a run, which I'll talk about, which is going on tomorrow. We do a rugby game. We do all sorts of stuff around sport. Education is key. I can see some young people on this call. Where are you, small children? There you are, there you are, there you are. And you know, we're only going to change things if we get the kids on board, aren't we? And if we reach out to children. Children don't see difference, or if they do, they see it as a really positive, fun thing. So we do a lot of work in schools. Faith and culture, really powerful, as Peter said, to do interfaith work. And as Mahmouda referred to earlier on, we had this wonderful community service this morning where we had people of every faith and denomination you can think of taking part in this really powerful service. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, please do, because it was very special. And then the creative arts. This is my worst one, because I am really not very arty and not very creative. But fortunately, I've got a brilliant team who are very good with music and dance and arts and crafts and all those sorts of things. Because again, those things, you know, unite us, bring us together. The yarn bombing looks amazing, Suzanne. I would make a total mess of it, but I would have a go if I was there in Birmingham with you. You know, those things that where we've got that synchronisation, we've got that joint purpose. Once again, the differences don't matter. And we end up chatting to somebody who might look different to us, might have some slightly different views to us, but actually we make those common connections. So that's kind of what we do through More in Common. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you've got and give you any more information you want on those things. And then at the heart of all this is this very special weekend, which is this weekend now, which is the Great Get Together weekend. And the reason that came about was because we had to make the really difficult decision. What do we do on the anniversary of Jo's murder? And the way that I describe this is, look, I wouldn't blame anybody for shutting up shop, closing the curtains, locking the door and not doing anything. You know, and I have my days when that is exactly what I feel like doing. But I continue to be motivated, inspired by Jo and Jo's passion for life and her positivity. And we chose to do something very special. We chose to do something very Jo. So we organised a national weekend of events and activities to bring people together in her name. So we did that in 2017, and quite frankly, people went bonkers for it, which I think showed the desire for the platform for people to make those connections and do those things. And sometimes that's all people need, isn't it? And one of the things I compare it to is we have the Tour de Yorkshire, which is this big cycling ride. Now, the cyclists come past you in about 4 seconds. Zip, zip, zip. Now, but there are thousands of people on the streets. Now, I'm sure for some people that is about the cycling, but actually it's about those connections and those crowds and those groups and that sense of togetherness, isn't it? And I think that's what people really, really like. Queen's Jubilee, VE Day, you know, those sorts of things when people are just brought together. And that's what the Great Get Together is all about. So we moved in 2018 to what would have been Jo's birthday. Again, we really want to focus on how Jo lived rather than how she died. And, you know, we did it last year again. And again, you know, thousands and thousands of people up and down the country doing amazing things in Jo's name. Which brings us to today and this weekend. So, like many of you, with all your plans, you probably at some point had to make the decision, cancel, postpone, go ahead, pretend this isn't happening. What do we do in lockdown in the middle of a global pandemic? Which, you know, let's be clear, first and foremost is an utterly tragic and horrific situation for us all to be in, and you know, the sense of loss that we are all feeling at the moment, whether that is loss of human life for many people or whether it's the loss of the freedoms that we've had taken away from us, is a way of tackling and challenging this pandemic and those human connections. You know, it's a tough time, there's no two ways about it, but I think that's what made us think that the Great Get Together is actually more important than ever. And even though we've had to flip it and we've had to be hugely creative about it, people have done that. You guys have done it. And this is what today's all about. So that's what the Great Get Together has been about this year. We're celebrating the power of community. We're staying connected. We're supporting each other. You know, and during the pandemic, we have seen that in spades, haven't we? We have seen how people have done that, reaching out to neighbours, shopping. You know, my local team have been on the ground, delivering prescriptions, you know, helping people who literally can't get out, people who are shielding, all those sorts of things. And we just felt it was really important to continue that. Whether it's doing virtual stuff like this or whether it's doing neighbourly acts of kindness and compassion. Tomorrow we have the Run for Jo. This is one of our big local events, and normally this would happen in the local country park and we would get around 1,000 people running through the woods together. Now clearly we can't do that, but again we've flipped it and we've put it onto a Strava group, and we've said to people, do your Run for Jo, join this group, do it wherever you are in the world, take a picture of yourself, send it to us, and you're part of something very, very special. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of people signed up in Australia, in Greece. I think there's someone in Brazil. It's all got a bit mad, you know, so we're doing it. So that's, you know, today is really, really special, really, really important. I am chuntering on a little bit too much now. We do the same thing in winter. We do a winter get together, which again is really focused around connecting people who might be on their own, lonely at winter, and various other things. But my main thing today really is to say thank you for the amazing things that you are doing in your communities. And thank you for having me as your guest.
Oh, it's been an honor. You know what? I'm getting private messages from here. Oh my God, I'm in love with Kim. And I've got one of my favorite people, Rabbi Margaret Jacobi. She's written, thank you, Kim, for your inspiring talk and work. We remembered Jo at our virtual synagogue service today. I'm glad you already posed the question, how do we reach out to people who wouldn't naturally engage in dialogue?
That is the challenge. I mean, that is the real challenge, isn't it? And I think it has to be very, very softly, very, very carefully. And I think a lot of it, what we always try and do through the foundation is it's by showing rather than telling. Yeah. And I think we try and do the work and let the work speak for itself. Yeah. You know, no one wants to be, you know, be told what to do and told how to behave. And I think that, again, that's where the Great Get Together, and not in a, I don't know, not in a negative way, but it's a really kind of stealthy way to approach cohesion. Because if you are running together, or you are eating cake together, or you've got that synchronization, the differences don't matter. And people don't like being forced. Go and meet somebody who's not like you. Go and meet, you know, no one likes that. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? So I think leading by example is really important, but it's not easy. I would totally agree.
Yeah.